This morning, your alarm went off. You checked your phone before your eyes fully opened. You rushed through breakfast, fought traffic or crowded trains, and sat down to 8 hours of work. Somewhere in the middle of it all, a thought crossed your mind. There has to be more to life than this. You probably assume your ancient ancestors had it worse. No medicine, no supermarkets. A brutal, exhausting fight for survival from sunrise to sunset. But the real answer is far stranger. Because when scientists actually measured how ancient humans spent their days, they found something that should not be possible. Your ancestors may have had more free time than you do.
Let that sink in. People with no farms, no stores, no technology beyond sharpened stone and fire somehow worked less than you. How? To answer that, you have to understand what your day is actually made of. You wake to a clock. You work for hours that someone else decided. You commute, you answer messages, you run errands, you collapse. If you add it all up, the average modern worker spends somewhere around 10 to 11 hours a day on work, commuting, chores, and life admin. And that number has been creeping upward for decades. You call this progress. But progress compared to what? For most of the 20th century, scientists assumed the answer was obvious. Life before agriculture was, in the famous words of the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, nasty, brutish, and short. Hunter-gatherers were pictured as starving, desperate, one bad hunt away from death. Textbooks repeated it. Museums illustrated it. Nobody had actually checked. Then, in the 1960s, somebody checked. An anthropologist named Richard Lee traveled to the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa to live with the Jew Hwansi, a hunter-gatherer people sometimes called the San. The Kalahari is not a gentle place. It is dry, hot, and unforgiving. If hunter-gatherer life was a desperate struggle anywhere, it should have been here. Lee did something radical. He followed people around with a notebook and recorded exactly how they spent every hour, not what he assumed, what actually happened. The results broke the field. The Jew Hwansi spent roughly 15 to 20 hours a week acquiring food. Add in tool-making, cooking, and camp chores, and the total came to around 40 hours a week of everything combined. Not 40 hours of work, plus commuting, plus errands, plus emails. 40 hours total. The rest of their time went to something anthropologists barely had a category for: resting, talking, napping in the shade, visiting relatives at other camps, playing games, telling stories around the fire, sometimes deep into the night. And they were not starving. Lee measured their diet, too. It was varied, rich in protein, and reliably above 2,000 calories a day. They knew hundreds of edible plants. They could read animal tracks, like you read text messages. The desert that looked empty to outsiders was, to them, a fully stocked pantry. Why work more when the work was done? In 1966, at a famous conference in Chicago called Man the Hunter, the anthropologist Marshall Sahlins took Lee's data and data like it and dropped a bomb on the scientific world. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Affluent, the word normally reserved for people with yachts. His argument was simple and devastating. There are two ways to be rich. You can produce more, or you can want less. Your ancestors took the second road. Their needs were modest. Their needs were met. And once they were met, they stopped. There was no reason to stockpile meat that would rot or gather more nuts than you could carry. Enough was enough. Literally. Think about how alien that idea is to you. When was the last time you felt you had enough? Enough money? Enough stuff? Enough success? Your entire economy is built on the assumption that you never will. Ancient humans built theirs on the assumption that you would, most afternoons, by around 2 o'clock. Now, you should be skeptical here. One study of one group in one desert is not the whole human story. And Sahlins, critics pointed out, was a little too eager to romanticize. Life expectancy was lower. Infant mortality was real. Droughts and injuries could be devastating. Nobody is telling you your ancestors lived in paradise, but the core finding refused to die. Because researchers kept checking in different places with better tools. Enter Herman Pontzer, an evolutionary anthropologist who studies the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last groups on Earth still living primarily by hunting and gathering. Pontzer did not use a notebook. He used doubly labeled water, a technique that tracks exactly how many calories a body burns. His question was different from Lee's. Not how long do they work, but how hard does their body work? The Hadza walk enormous distances. Women dig for tubers. Men chase game across the savannah. Surely their bodies burn vastly more energy than yours as you sit in your chair. They don't. Pontzer found that Hadza adults burn roughly the same number of total calories per day as sedentary office workers in Europe and America. The same. Their bodies simply budget energy differently, spending it on movement instead of, among other things, chronic stress responses and inflammation. And their working rhythm matched what Lee had seen decades earlier. A few focused hours of foraging in the morning, then back to camp. Then the thing your calendar has no name for. Unstructured time. Hours of it. Every single day. Even sleep tells the same story. You might imagine that without electric light, ancient humans slept the moment darkness fell. The sleep researcher Jerome Siegel tested this by fitting Hadza, San, and Semaine people with activity monitors. They did not go to bed at sunset. They stayed up for hours after dark, socializing around the fire, and slept 6 to 7 hours, roughly what you get. The difference was not quantity, it was quality. Almost none of them suffered from insomnia. Many of their languages barely have a word for it. When did lying awake at night worrying become normal? Here is where the story takes its darkest turn. Because if hunter-gatherers had it relatively easy, then the greatest catastrophe in the history of human free time was not a plague or an ice age. It was farming. Around 12,000 years ago, some humans began planting seeds instead of gathering them. It sounds like an upgrade. It was, in many ways, a trap. Farming produced more calories per acre, which meant more babies, which meant more mouths, which meant more farming. Within a few generations, there was no going back. And the workload exploded. Fields needed clearing, planting, weeding, watering, harvesting, threshing, storing, and defending. Skeletons from early farming communities show the price. Compared to the foragers who came before them, early farmers were shorter, had worse teeth, more disease, and joints ground down by endless repetitive labor. Your back hurts from your chair. Theirs was destroyed by the hoe. The anthropologist James Soseman, who spent decades living with the Jew Huanzi, argues that this was the moment humanity's relationship with work fundamentally flipped. Foragers worked to meet their needs and then stopped. Farmers worked to build surplus, because surplus was survival. A full granary meant you might live through a bad year, and surplus created something else. Some people ended up with more of it than others. Hierarchy, kings, taxes, servants. The endless race for more had begun, and you were born straight into the middle of it. So when you feel that Sunday night dread, that sense that your life is a treadmill you never chose, you are not weak. You are not lazy. You are a forager's mind running on a farmer's schedule. Your brain evolved across hundreds of thousands of years, in which a few hours of purposeful effort, in constant company, in open air, was a complete and honorable day. Now it is asked to sit still under artificial light and stay productive for hours that would have baffled your ancestors. The mismatch is not in you, it is in the arrangement. But do not mistake their free time for your free time. This may be the most important part. When the Juhuanzi finished foraging, they did not scroll. They did not binge. Their leisure was not consumption. It was connection, gossip, jokes, music, dance, stories that carried the knowledge of generations. Anthropologists noticed something remarkable about the fireside hours in particular. Daytime talk among foragers is mostly practical. Complaints, plans, logistics. But after dark, around the fire, conversation transforms. It turns to stories, to the ancestors, to the spirit world, to laughter. Some researchers believe those firelit hours are where imagination itself was forged, where religion began, where you, the storytelling animal, was born. Your ancestors were not killing time. Time, for them, was not something to kill. There was no clock to race, no inbox to clear, no feed to refresh. Anthropologists who live with foraging peoples often describe the same disorienting experience. The sense that time simply moves differently there. Slower, fuller, present. And here is the final twist. You cannot go back. 8 billion people cannot live by hunting and gathering. Farming and industry are the only reasons you exist at all. But you can steal back the one insight your ancestors would find blindingly obvious. The point of work is to be done with it. Enough exists. It is a real place, and human beings lived there for 300,000 years. The question is not whether you can return to the Kalahari. The question is smaller and closer. What is your enough? And what would you do this afternoon if you had already reached it? Your ancestors knew the answer. They would find some shade. They would find each other. They would talk until the fire burned low.
Tomorrow morning, your alarm will go off again. You will check your phone before your eyes fully open. And somewhere in the middle of the rush, that same thought will cross your mind. There has to be more to life than this. Now you know the strangest part. For most of human history, there was. And it wasn't more at all. It was less.